you splendiferous little marketing bees. You're tuned into episode 63 of the Marketing Buzzword Podcast.
This is the Marketing Buzzword Podcast, the podcast where we dissect the world's most common marketing buzzwords. Hold on tight. We are about to fly around the beehive to see the latest buzzwords that stuck to the marketing bees.
Hello again and welcome back to the Marketing Buzzword Podcast. This is a podcast which helps you to understand what all these business and marketing buzzwords actually mean and how they can be helpful or not going forward. I'm your host, Ben Roberts, and in this show, I'm the marketing bee in charge of making sure I'm getting the right guests and ask the right questions to make sure that these words and phrases actually make sense. And in today's show, we're going to make sense of the buzzword creative AI, aka artificial intelligence. Before we do that, though, I need to remind you this podcast is powered by Talkative. Talkative is a company that brings together live web chat, voice calling, video calling, and co-browsing together in one package embedded into your website. This allows you, your company and your agents to be able to interact on a more personal level with your website visitors, be able to collect more data about your website visitors so that you can continue to offer them a more personalized service and ultimately automatically feed that data into your CRM for future reference. Find out more at talkative.uk, and they recently launched a new website too, so do have a look at that even if you looked at the old one. And one final thing before we get on to this week's guest, if you are loving the show and you are enjoying what we're trying to do here at the Marketing Buzzword Podcast and Project, please do feel free to leave a review on iTunes. I really do appreciate it. Because really there are never enough reviews for the amount of listeners that I have on the show, and it will literally take you 10 seconds at most, even if it's just leaving a star rating and not a comment. That I really appreciate that. Right, that's more enough about me and the show. It's time to introduce this week's guest. And this week's expert buzzword, bees. Yes, bees. Are Kerry Harrison and Richard Norton, aka Norts. So, they are the founders of a company called Tiny Giant. Tiny Giant is a new Southwest Let's start this again, Ben. Let's start this from the start. Tiny Giant is a shiny new Southwest start co-founded by Kerry Harrison and Richard Norton. Please find out more at tinygiant.io. Kerry Harrison is an award-winning copywriter who loves all things shiny and new. She's also a tenacious interviewer in search of the truth. Richard Norton is also an award-winning copywriter and a creative director. But that was then, and Norts is only ever looking forward. Both have recently stepped away from conventional agency life to collaborate with brands, businesses, agencies and developers in the realms of creative AI, voice and online bots. Moving ideas with minds and machines. This sits at the heart of what they and Tiny Giant is all about. I had a lot of fun in this interview. There were some small little breaks and little crackles in the sounds we went through, but the quality of the actual conversation is absolutely awesome. So please do bear with and check it out. It's really good. And that's enough from me. Let's go on the show. I've always got to remember the bit that I need to say before I get on the show. Anyway, yeah, that's more enough from me. Let's get on with the show. Kerry, Richard, welcome to the podcast. So, today I have got Kerry, aka Machine Queen, and Richard Norton, aka Nort, co-founders of something new called Tiny Giant, and I am so excited because I think we're gonna have a lot of fun in this episode.
Well, I hope so. What do you think, Kerry?
I think so, yeah.
Fun is
For sure.
We almost call ourselves Tiny Fun Giant because it's our middle name, isn't we?
I'm not even going to ask why your mum put you as gave you the middle name of Fun, but hey, I expect big things now. If your middle name is Fun, I'm expecting big things from this episode.
Fair enough. That's fair enough.
So today we're going to talk about something called creative AI, aka artificial intelligence, and actually how we can be creative about that. Because everyone's talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and how it's like the new big thing, the next thing, the most dazzling thing that's ever graced the earth. And other people are going, I don't trust it, I don't believe in it. So let's start off with breaking it straight down to the very core. Norts, what is AI/creative AI? What exactly is it?
Okay, so can I do it as a short answer or a long answer? That's something for me to ponder. Let's consider. If we go all the way back into the 19th century to Ada Lovelace, the daughter of Lord Byron. She is kind of credited with coming up with mathematical computational algorithms, right, which is at the basis of this. But it's kind of funny because algorithms aren't, like, you hear about algorithms in AI and machine learning, but algorithms itself isn't necessarily a mathematical thing. It's just a set of instructions. I think you could make a good case to say like a cake recipe is an algorithm because it's a set of instructions that allows you to do something. Or if you look at a music score, I would say that's an algorithm because if you play all those notes in the right order at the right tempo, you'll get the tune. It's the same thing. But in recent times, it's become very much about a mathematical connotation. So again, you go back to artificial intelligence. Let's hurtle to the 20th century, about 1956, something like that. The two guys, Minsky and McCarthy, who says they came up with artificial intelligence. And I would imagine, and to be honest, that holds still now. So essentially, that is the ability of machines to take information and then do tasks that you could say as good as and now beyond the capability of human beings. That's a very high level explanation of it, and there's lots of I'm sure we'll touch on some of the other sort of jargony buzzwords in that space, but essentially it's that to super perform. I think why it's suddenly become very pertinent in the world, because in effect that's 62 years old since that was sort of first mooted at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. It's very much to do with the fact that now the world has data in everything. I mean, even the few minutes or seconds we've been speaking, we're creating a whole load of data that can be used for something. And because the world now is awash with it, we're not even knee deep in data, are we? We're like many feet deep in data. That data can be used by machines to do tasks. And so what's kind of happened in the last maybe 3 or 4 years, certainly in marketing circles, is this notion of, artificial intelligence as being a viable thing that you can use in many ways. And there are, across whether it's medical things or legal things or autonomous cars, you can see it at play. So that's a kind of overview. And as I say, it's an umbrella term. It's a very fashionable umbrella term at the moment. And then you come to the section which kind of we're interested in, is this creative AI, where it's very much about, okay, in advertising and marketing, how can you take that machine learning, all those kind of tools and technology, and apply it in ways that ultimately offer marketeers and advertisers greater efficiency and effectiveness, the two buzzwords of the industry. What do we say, Kerry? The thing about rather than efficiency and effectiveness, we say it's about doing things better and doing better things. And that's kind of where we're at with it, really. That wasn't a short answer, Ben, but it was an answer, wasn't it?
No, that's exactly sort of what we're looking for. And again, look, you almost summed it up nicely. This is why I decided to set up this podcast, because people use these terms and they're big umbrella terms, and some of them are niche terms that people are going, oh, this is a thing. Should I care about this? Is it actually applicable to me? And that leads me on to actually something that I was thinking about as you were talking there. Is saying, is creative AI, or even AI itself, is this for developers? Are marketers really the people who are driving AI? Is it too complex for layman marketer, or is it something that actually almost every marketer in any sphere should be starting to understand and get their head around? Or is it something that actually, for a lot of people, it is going to be a developer that actually leads the implementation and the usage of creative or otherwise AI?
Hey, Machine Queen, do you want to go around?
So I think it definitely is at the moment in the developer sphere, I think, just because they're the people that know the technical side of it. But I don't think that from an advertising and marketing point of view that it has to be about the developer. And actually what we're doing at Tiny Giant is working as creatives alongside developers so that we can create something much more interesting and much more likely to cause a bit of a stir on the scene. So I think I really like the idea that it will be a combination of the two. So you need that technical background and the information and the actual how you actually do it. But actually, as creatives, it can also really work nicely that you can come up with ideas that then the developers and the AI can then implement and change. So that's where we are, I think.
And I'd also add to that. I mean, if people think, is this relevant to me? You think about in a lot of, not necessarily creative ways, but in sort of realms of Spotify and Netflix and all sorts of way that organizations are already using machine learning and neural networks to kind of make people make decisions. They don't even know they're making those decisions. So what you get served up as the sort of choice of things you want to listen to or watch, all these kind of things in creative arenas, that's all being done at an automated machine learning kind of very sophisticated level.
Yeah.
And, you know, the very fact that the kind of giants of the world, the kind of the four horsemen, as Scott Galloway calls them, the Googles and the Amazons, you know, they are putting so much time, effort into this. I think it's a foolish marketeer who sort of puts their head in the sand and thinks it's going to go away. This isn't something. I don't know. In some ways, like, virtual reality hasn't sort of died on its arse, has it? But it's become a much more niche thing. AR might become a massive thing, but it's on those kind of hype curves. But by the nature of AI, because it is such a broad term and there's many, many things that sit under it, and ultimately it's powered by data. The two things that power it is the volume of data, which there's a lot of, but there's also the computational power of computers, the speed of processing, which is sort of exponentially gets bigger and better every year. Therefore, it's not something that's going to suddenly be wiped away. It's only going to become a much deeper, more profound kind of part of not just marketing, but everyday lives. I mean, what?
Yeah, I think it's also the quality of data is also really important, isn't it, on this front? Because if you haven't got the right quality of data, then actually all the algorithms, the way the outputs are from all this machine learning, AI, all this intelligence is actually the outputs are going to be wrong. So actually that's where potentially mistakes are easily made, is actually if you're not getting the right quality of data in the first place to be able to make sure that you're programming these machines to be able to intelligently, because they can only do what's in front, what you present them with in the first place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think alongside what you're saying is that because of the data that's going in, I don't know if you've read about this recently, but the fact that a lot of biases, human biases, are going into the algorithms at the same time, and that's quite difficult to undo. And I think specifically gender bias and racial biases could potentially become a bigger issue in light of, you know, the AI and how that's changing. So yeah, I think that is really important. The data has to be right, but it's also the people that are programming it do need to have a responsibility to make sure that the data that's going in is responsible and ethical from that point of view.
And I also think that, like, I guess, you know, lots of this stuff ultimately spawns out of kind of Silicon Valley and these sort of places and these kind of technologically minded people, these moonshotters, these kind of visionaries. It comes from their minds, and again, I think, as Kerry said, they live their life, and it's very detached from other lives. And so sometimes, what seems like a brilliant idea, autonomous fleets of cars transporting people, on paper, electrically powered, sounds like an incredibly progressive idea for society, which it is. But then, when you actually get down to the human level of it, if you were a woman and you were picked up in a car with other people in that car, and there's no driver because it's an autonomous car, and there's a man in the car, how are you going to feel about that? These kind of issues tend not to get thought about until it's too late, if you know what I mean, or on that journey. I mean, I would say the story of Facebook is a classic case, isn't it? When Facebook first came shiny and everybody rushed to it, and it became sort of, it grew and it grew. Who was to know, like where we are now, that the growth of Facebook would become so in a funny sort of way? Issues would come about which they have no idea they would have envisaged, would they? If you see what I mean?
They wouldn't. And I think as well that a problem that I've been reading about lately is that a lot of people that are programming tend to be white male, and as a result of that, a lot of the biases that go into obviously then go into the algorithms, and that can be quite detrimental.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important to understand, isn't it? There is so many biases, and again this technology is only good as the inputs and the people who design it. And that sort of leads me into one of those things, actually, Nort, that you were saying about Silicon Valley being in this little bubble, and it's asking, actually, is creative AI particularly something that most businesses are going to need to adopt in the future? Is this something that is going to be useful for some businesses but ultimately isn't going to become mainstream? Or is this something that actually people, by getting involved now, are well ahead of the curve, and it is a curve that's going to become one that is mainstream? I know it's quite a difficult one to say, because who's to know again, like your example there, that Facebook was going to become the thing in the world. But do you think it's going down that way, or do you think it's going to be a little bit like sort of VR, where it's sort of actually everyone talks about it becoming mainstream, and then actually the reality is actually it's quite niche?
What would I say? I think the notion of artificial intelligence will inherently exponentially be part of human life. That's a fact. I mean, I would say that as somebody who's just launched a business is interested in creative AI, voice, and kind of bots. However, what I would say is that the notion that it's something that is you can set to one side. It's like all things, right? If a new technology comes along, it doesn't necessarily wipe away all old technologies, right? It doesn't mean that something comes along, the internet doesn't get rid of television. These things kind of coexist, and the kind of size of them goes up and down. But creative AI, in terms of its use by marketers, and the fact that we kind of work quite closely with a whole bunch of people who are very sophisticated in their knowledge, understanding, coding skills, and we've seen it in action, and we kind of used it a little bit here and there so far, goes to tell me that you will use it. Ultimately, where this is going is the sort of it's interesting. It's the democratization of creative, right? Now, if I can expand on that, what do I mean? In effect, if I was just people listening go, well, okay, give us some examples. So on the one hand, you can do things with creative AI where you can take something and you can scale it up. So think of a lot of tasks. There are companies in the world who are doing things, if we break it down to copy or design or to film, who can do things at scale very fast. For example, you get companies like Posado and Phrasey, and they can do things with natural language generation. They can write hundreds of subject lines, okay? Now, me and Kerry come from a world where we're not technology people so far. We don't do coding, but we love technology. Yeah. But we're creatives, right? That's our background. We're both writers, long-standing writers. But I can tell you, as someone who's been tasked with writing, 10 subject lines for an email, okay, I could do that, and I can try all the techniques I might know with power words or alliteration, but I don't actually know that which is going to be the best subject line. You test, you iterate, you test, you iterate, yeah? If you're suddenly then presented with a tool that allows you to write 1,000, right, instantaneously, not only does that take that burden away from you to concentrate maybe on higher things or better ideas, it actually will probably deliver a better result, because it becomes ultimately a numbers game. The same goes with, say, social media ads. A designer can come in, they can design an ad given the mood of that particular day, given the brand book they have, and that's it. But it's perfectly possible now to take, one ad and do, any number of iterations of it. I'm talking 10, 50, 600, place them all in the marketplace, and then you can identify that which works best, and then you iterate that, and you iterate that. And this isn't something that happens over the course of days. This takes like time that makes a cup of tea. You know what I mean? So some people think, oh, this is terrifying. It's going to take all the jobs away and all that sort of thing. Well, it's going to take work away, but not necessarily in terms of removal of jobs. If it's a possibility, it means that actually people can concentrate on some of the kind of better things, some of the grander things. Because you think of, oh, he's off on one now, isn't he, Nort? If you think, have you ever stood at a coffee point or somewhere, what do you call a water thing in the work, you know what I mean? People don't ever have conversations. They stand around and talk about that. I saw a fantastic mobile ad on my phone the other day, right? And that's because nearly all mobile and social advertising is rubbish, because it's all about speed, and it's all about kind of efficiency, and it's all about just trying to get things done with very simple messages. And we kind of think, well, actually, you can put idea and emotion and empathy into that kind of advertising, and you can do it at scale as well. It kind of, if there's a possibility, and this is an opinion because it hasn't happened yet, but in some ways that kind of use of time can mean that actually you could possibly lead to some sort of golden age. I'm getting on my soapbox now, because the people who've got creative minds in that industry could spend time actually thinking about the nature of the ad, the nature of the audience, what is it that inspires, and I know you can take data for that. So you can use creative AI in that respect, just purely as a means to create volume of content and work out what works. It becomes an objective success as opposed to a subjective guess. Yeah, I did a rhyme there, Gary.
No, I love that. But that was one of the things actually in the UK we saw really recently. Actually, I think it was like one of the big trade unions here was saying actually in the future we can potentially go down to those things like a 4-day working week because of advances in technology. It's not necessarily reducing jobs, but actually reducing the amount of time that we have to actually work, or potentially because of these advancements in machine learning and technology. And it's interesting to see where some of these barriers divide. I think the worry that people really have is that it's actually not these creative jobs that are necessarily going to go, or these sort of mid-higher level jobs that are going to go. It's the bottom level jobs. But I think that's a conversation for a completely different podcast, and I feel like I'm going to end up going on a completely irrelevant rant there.
Well, I mean, the notion of work, I mean, it's so sort of hardwired into our mind what work is supposed to be, isn't it, right? It's fairly, I mean, there are lots of variety of work, but standard definition, if you ask them, what is work? It's a 5-day week, 2-day weekend. Why does anything have to be anything? You know what I mean? So there is potentially quite a dramatic. I'm not going to use. I've got a word for later now, which I'm not going to use now. But we'll do it at the end. But there's a sort of rewiring of society that artificial intelligence and the potential it brings could actually sort of change society. You'd like to think it could change it for the better and give people more freedom. There's all sorts of things about distribution of capital and wealth and all that sort of stuff. But again, if we were to start as a blank sheet of paper, I think it's a sort of it could be profoundly inspiring. The only thing that tends to mess up these sort of great sort of golden dreams are probably humans and their strange kind of selfish desires for, and do you know what I mean? An attainment of power. But hey, we see that every day in the world anyway. Again, it goes back to biases, doesn't it? And cognitive biases and human behaviour.
Yeah,
the machines are behaved normally.
Yeah.
I say us as humans, we're amazing at coming up and dreaming up all these ideas and creating all these things, but I tell you what, we're equally better, if not even more efficient, at breaking them all down.
That's the point. So I suppose we covered off you there. That's one side of what creative AI can do in that respect. I mean, there's other aspects about neural networks and deep learning where you can take it into other fields of comms. The other thing we're very interested in, which we've sort of started experimenting in, is the idea of actually, can machines think in ways that humans don't, but then so that you don't see what the output of the machine as the end process, you actually see it as the means of your inspiration. So, for example, if I show the context, so me and Kerry get a brief to do something, and we have to design some ads for it doesn't matter what the channel is. So we sit there and think about it, and we use all our biases, all our history. Our ideas ultimately come from everything we've experienced, yeah? And so many people are able to channel that creativity better than others. That's just the way of the world. So we do that, but we come to an impasse. What if you were to take that sort of information and data, put it into a machine, and the machine doesn't have any, again, it's no biases. It's a very objective delivery, and it pumps out a series of ideas that some are crazy, some are completely unworkable, but within that, it's almost like, what's the metaphor I'd like it to? It's almost like panning for gold. Do you know what I mean? There's some brilliant examples of people doing this in fashion, where they take sort of they design fashion ranges, and whereby the machine delivers something, and then it gets what I call it. It's almost like intelligent augmentation. It's IA. So what did they do instead of AI? Because actually, you take the inspiration from the machine, and then you basically put it into the human context to make it work. There's some really great examples. There's a fantastic thing. I don't want to commit with an Italian American. It was like a chair design, where the chairs came out of the machine. They were it designed what it thought. It was fed lots of data about kind of Danish, Scandinavian chair design, which was considered to be the coolest, isn't it? And it created its own. Half the chairs you couldn't sit on, but with a human then engineered to work out, well, if you put that strap there and that strand there, you've got this really amazing kind of chair. You've got this, and so it almost like it's a way of using machines to, I don't want to use the word to think, but to deliver outputs, for want of a better term, that actually can then be kind of use a bit of empathy, a bit of human intelligence to make it happen. And this can happen in any kind of field. It can happen in copywriting, it can happen in design, it can happen in art direction. It's just using machines to just give you more tools for your creative armory, really. Think in ways that you never thought. See what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's also another, if we talk about the Nutella example, there's also another way where the combination of human, so designers and copywriters and creatives and machines can work together to create something that wouldn't a few years ago have been possible at all. So there was a recent campaign done in Italy by Ogilvy, I think, is that right?
Something like that.
Yeah. So what they did was the whole idea was to create the concept was to celebrate the individuality of Nutella and the uniqueness of Nutella. There's nothing else quite like it. And so the designers came up with a range of really lovely patterns and a range of colours that went really nicely with the brand and sat really nicely with the Nutella brand. And then they used an algorithm. So they put all of those into the algorithm. And then the computer then came up with 7 million unique versions of the Nutella jar. So, and they went out on the shelves with 7 million unique ones, and they sold out within a month, which is incredible, really, that you could shift that many jars of Nutella in a month. But the fact is that without the designers and their great patterns and all their thoughts about the colours that would sit nicely with the brand, without that, the machine couldn't have created 7 million unique jars. And in the same way, no design team could ever have created 7 million unique packages. I mean, it just wouldn't have been economically viable for a team of designers to sit there and create 7 million packages. So this was then, with the combination of algorithms and designers, 7 million unique jars of Nutella were created. And I think that's a really good example of how this kind of combination works really well, and just how what's now possible that would not, a few years ago just wouldn't have been.
Dare I say, moving ideas with minds and machines.
So, yeah.
Can I say that? I have said it. And also, they recommend a lot of fat Italians for that month, piling it on with their Nutella.
Yeah.
The good thing about that, though, is again, you can take that as a model. Let's strip away if it's not Nutella and it's not colours and patterns, but the idea that you can create hyper-personalisation in terms of product or service for anyone can only happen with kind of human empathy or human intelligence and machine kind of efficiency. But to put those two together, it's like an A plus B equals D. And so that, to us, is a very exciting kind of combination. And that's kind of, I think, why we kind of stepped away from sort of a conventional career in advertising agencies and stuff and marketing agencies, because you can see that there's just so many advantages in using this. The other thing is, just from sort of personal experience of like marketing budgets in this day and age, everyone gets squeezed more. Everyone gets challenged to do something in half the time for half the budget, but it's got to be twice as good. There's only so much you can do with a human mind put under pressure. So therefore, it says, why not use a machine to help kind of like augment that experience and give you some time back to actually think about the things that matter. So in a funny sort of way, it's like, touched on it before, it's almost like machines can help sort of human creativity in some ways be a bit more, dare I use the term, creative.
It's almost like what the theme of the podcast is, isn't it? But yeah, it's something I hadn't actually thought about in a huge amount of detail before, in terms of from that perspective. I looked at it again essentially, and I assume a lot of other people do as well, is that actually AI is the output and not necessarily the throughput in terms of using AI to actually create ideas. I understood about things like from an SEO research perspective, different terms people are using, different variations, different regional differences, but actually using it to think and come up with ideas. Again, I love that Nutella example where we were talking about sort of 7 million different unique jars. There is absolutely no way that actually individually the machines or the humans could have ever come up with that, but yet together, actually, it's you're a force to be reckoned with, and that can have so many positive permutations for businesses. But if, for example, a small or medium-sized business, say, came to you guys at Tiny Giant and said, we're thinking about implementing something to do with AI, where should people be looking, like casting their eye first? Should they be looking at things like advertising on social? Is that quite an easy way to potentially get people to get started, or should they be casting their net somewhere else?
That's a good question. It's funny, isn't it? You always you meet clients, brands, and businesses who say they're brave and they're bold and they're progressive, but of course, again, that's a very subjective term. One person's brave and bold and progressive is someone's, sort of traditional and unchanging. Again, I would say that the kind of experiences these things are, I think one of the great interesting points about this is a lot of what AI can do in marketing and in music and all these. I mean, one of the interesting things we sort of dabble with as well is looking at AI in music, because you think about people's content on people, content, create content. And content needs soundtracks, and soundtracks cost a bit of money, don't they? Right? But yet you can actually use kind of generative music that's created by computers. And there are businesses now that give you a very reasonable subscription model to have like an infinite number of tunes that you can apply to your content. And I know that necessarily music isn't the be-all and end-all of content, but it does play a very important part in delivering an emotional experience. And again, we're kind of like, if you said this journey was a mountain, I don't even know if we're on the foothills, but you know that the nature of the quality of what you can get, what was 2 years ago, plinky plunky, synthy stuff, is now far more sophisticated. There's a company in Brighton called Filmstro that deliver this kind of generative music that's very, very cinematic, and you can basically dial it up as you sort of create it to get a theme that's more perfect. You can almost do it live, and I think a lot of these tools, probably in the next 3 years, I'm going to punt 3 years, 5 at max, is going to make advertising, the ability to be creative, far more democratic. If you see what I mean, it's going to democratize. There's a word people like to use. It's going to democratize marketing in some way, which is good and bad, because ultimately, if you give it's like Instagram, isn't it? It turns everyone into a photographer. Well, there are some people who are brilliant at it, and there are some people who are so-so. But you could probably say the bar's been raised in the world of photography. Plus, also, it's created tons and tons and tons and tons of images that hitherto didn't exist. But where would I look? I think there's so much to explore. I mean, the whole thing about, we're very interested at the moment. We've been messing around, certainly the last week or two, with a lot of voice skills stuff. You went to a very interesting convention last week, didn't you? You might want to talk about.
I went to the Voice Summit in London, which is really good. Loads of people from all areas of voice technology, people from Google, Alexa, talking about Alexa skills. So I think that's another area of, it's a subset of AI, but where things are going to get quite useful and big in terms of marketing, just what's possible using voice technology. So that's another area.
So I'm going to put it out. I'm going to put out two bits. One of the things that we're scratching our head about, and it's like, how do you think about that? It's this idea that, again, if you look at the giants of the industry, they're putting the Amazons and the Googles and the Apples. They're putting a lot of time and effort, an inordinate amount of time and effort into things like voice, right? And it's almost like, the smart speaker. I can see one across the room here. I'm not going to say it because it'll go off, won't it? But you know what I mean? People have got them, and then a lot of people say, I don't really use it. I just play music through it or whatever. But in effect, the smart speakers that have sort of been created in the last sort of 4 years or so, and maybe if you look at the adoption curve of it, it's faster than the phone, to be honest. People don't necessarily know what to do with it because it's still very, very, very early days. But if you start taking that as a skill and embedding it in things other than a speaker into the home, talking in voice like we are now, this is a far more frictionless way for us to communicate through voice than it is any other way, isn't it? Yeah. So if you can do that, using neural networks, using deep learning, that's going to make the kind of world, that's going to make comms, that's going to make marketing interesting. If we could come up with the Instagram of voice, Ben, then that's what we're doing. You know what I mean?
And they've just released. Google have just released. I don't know if Alexa have already got that or not, but Google have just released one with a screen as well, which I think will change the way that things work. So perhaps shopping will be a bit more viable on voice technology then, because at the moment it's quite difficult, I think, to shop. Although people do, it's difficult to shop just with your voice. It'd be good to see what's possible and what's available visually as well. So I think that's something that's going to shape things.
It's an evolution, isn't it? It's an evolution of everything, and it's very early. If it was evolution, we've only just
stopped.
Have we actually crawled out of the sea yet, or we're still in the sea? Maybe we're just a microorganism just glooping around. Yeah.
But it's true though, isn't it? I've got one of the home system, home smart speakers. I can say it because I'm not in my home now. Haha, Alexa, and see if it turns on for you one. But
I've got Google.
It was worth a punt. But with that, with this in it, I think it's amazing that, like you said about these smart speakers, the way that they're now being used, the way that they're being worked in terms of or how they're not being worked. Because yes, Alexa got the one with the screen, and again, it's trying to understand actually for people that need to get in on board. Actually, is it quicker? Is it more efficient? That's ultimately what people want these days. And again, like we talked about with the creative AI earlier, actually, if it creates a quicker or more frictionless journey or different or better outputs, that's when people will start realizing it. And I guess that's where some of the difficulty is at the moment. People going, okay, I understand how easy it is to play music through my smart speaker, but they don't necessarily understand actually how they can get their news through there much quicker, or how they can shop through there quicker, because it's not easier to shop through a smart speaker. And as they start adding these new technologies, when it becomes either more increasingly frictionless, better results, or faster, that's when we'll start seeing actually people will then embrace that technology even further. Same with mobile phones. Now we're getting phones that could do a lot of the same things that they could do a number of years ago, but they've now got bigger screens. So actually video is just better now, because actually more people can shoot it and more people can play high quality video. So actually it becomes much more viable for everyone to do it.
Yeah, I think the other top aspect, and again, even in the sort of last year, is how much stuff you can do using AI applications on your mobile phone. Again, going back, even creative things that marketeers can use to make things happen in the same way. I mean, ultimately, your mobile phone is your life support machine, isn't it? Never more than about 6 inches away from your body most of the time.
Mine's currently tucked between my legs, actually.
There you go. It's a very vivid image you've given for us and the listeners. But yeah, there's all sorts of things. I mean, this for another day, probably all sorts of interesting applications. I mean, you can go on to something like Google AI experiments if people want to do it and check out. There's loads of crazy stuff that basically Google get people to do, and they put the code. It's just encouraging the world to. That's what it's about. It's experiments. Yeah. It's the same with voice. People aren't probably using all the. I mean, there's 40,000 skills on an Alexa have been generated. Probably 95% of them right now are, for want of a better term, not very good, egregious. But I think 40,000 is a very small number in the scheme of things. But it's, again, I think people's time poorness doesn't allow them the time to sit. Whoever sits down with their Alexa for 4 hours and works out, can I buy bacon? Yeah. Can I listen to a story? Can I do any number of things? You can pretty much do it. And I suppose our task as kind of marketeers in this space now is to think about using these new technologies in a way that will actually make people's lives. Ultimately, it's about simplicity, easier. You don't want to use that creative AI or any of the kind of tools, these modern MarTech tools at disposal to make life harder, to make the journey.
Or just to use them for the sake of it. I think a lot of people at the moment with AI are just saying, oh yeah, I need to have something AI, but actually that's not the point. You should only really use the technology and harness that technology if it's going to be valuable and make an impact on your marketing or whatever it is that you want to achieve. So I think that's quite important as well.
Exactly, it's got to make you either faster, it's got to be faster, smarter, more efficient, cheaper. It's got to be any one of those things that people are craving in their lives. People are time poor, they haven't got the money, they haven't got the. How can it actually make people's lives better? And that is the ultimate differentiator in terms of whether a technology really takes off or not, isn't it? Because it's easy enough for people to buy the stuff, but only when us as marketers actually say, look, this will make you happier, faster, quicker, more efficient, give you more time to spend with your family, allow you to find songs that you've never listened to before, allow you to get news and ideas that you'd never even thought possible before, speak to family members, call people, all these things. It's us as marketers, it's our job to make that life easier, as you so brilliantly put earlier.
Eloquently, Kerry, I thought. Eloquently put. Eloquently.
Yeah, I think... For example, with the voice technology, it's brilliant. But if it's easier to actually get your phone out and go on an app to get what you need, then that's what you should do. And you shouldn't use the voice. You should only use voice technology if it is going to make, like Nortz is saying, if it's a more frictionless and more beneficial way of getting what you need. And so I think that's important to consider as well, that you don't just adopt stuff just because it's cool or it's the thing to do. You have to make sure that what you're offering your audience is a better experience.
Yeah, and that's ultimately, isn't it? With small businesses, we talked about going right back to the initial question, is actually saying that if you were to go down this creative AI route, is how are you adding value? How are you making things easier? So I guess it was almost like a leading question, is saying, because I almost led you a really open question, and you could have gone down any route, and we've essentially come back to where my initial thoughts were, is actually, look, you can implement any sort of creative AI as long as it's adding value and it's easier, better, faster for the customers. If it's actually something that your customers aren't going to benefit from, your audience aren't going to benefit from, then actually now may not be the right time. AI may still be right for you, but you may need further developments down the line. But right now, you should focus on actually that where the value is for your customers. But with these changes happening at such an incredible rate, you never know when the next bit of development in AI is actually going to massively impact your business.
Yeah, and the Nutella example is a really good one. Is the fact you do great things. I just think you need a good idea at the start of it. You need to know what you want to achieve, and if you do, you can harness AI technology to do great stuff. But it's just has to be the right thing.
No, my brain is going. The cogs are turning. The cobwebs are being blown off here as I'm thinking of potential possibilities and ideas that where businesses can sort of implement AI, and I'm definitely going to be having a sit down with myself and having a long hard talk to myself about things that we could potentially do that would or wouldn't be impacted by creative AI. And I also want to say thank you so much for you guys coming on today. I think it's really opened up a real good discussion about creative AI. Is there anything then that you guys particularly think that is almost like a signing off note on creative AI, something that people really need to think about, consider, or ask themselves, or even if they come to a company like Tiny Giant, how should people approach implementing AI or creative AI?
Good question.
I think, in terms of what we would do, I think this is always something we said on our website, in which we really wholeheartedly believe that actually it starts with a really good idea. So I think a client would come to us, and then we'd assess what they want to achieve and what their ambitions are, and then we would start with an idea and then choose a suitable technology to do the best possible job. So I think it's difficult to say, we'll just use this or just use that. I think it just comes down to the individual and the client and what their requirements are, and that's where we always start, and then we move on to the idea. And
the thing for me, Ben and Kerry, would be that most advertising or marketing fails because what's the first rule of advertising? You've got to get noticed, haven't you? If you don't get noticed, it's a bit like I think I saw on one of your other podcasts about, is content good content if it never gets seen? Right? That's kind of fairly deep and philosophical. But it's the same in advertising. If an ad never gets noticed by anybody, then it's not worked, has it? So therefore, the best way to create something to get your brand, business, service, product noted is to deliver an idea that's unusual, exceptional, not like anybody else, to differentiate yourself. The world, to me, despite the fact there's probably more marketing messages dumped on people every day than there's ever been in the history of anywhere, is that most of it looks kind of the same and it feels the same. Everything falls into the same sort of area because everybody's worried about, I don't want to be different. If we're different, people might like. And that's exactly, I suppose, as us as creatives coming to this, we love to harness these new technologies. But yeah, it's like you've got to have a decent idea up front that makes people laugh, cry, go wow, shocked, provoked. That's where we want to be like punk rock technologists. That's what I mean. You've got to have something. You've got to stop people in their tracks, haven't you? That's what people can. It's easy to ignore everything and see something, isn't it? That's what I say. It is.
I absolutely love that as well. I'm also really proud that people can even quote my back catalogue of podcasts to me now. This is brilliant, but I agree wholeheartedly. And again, what is great, content is only great if it's seen by other people. When does it become great? And I still stand by that idea, but I'm so thankful that you can quote my back catalogue to me. That makes me proud.
Well, we didn't research. We got a machine to research it for us. Yay.
Oh no, brilliant. Thanks so much today, guys. I've had an absolute blast, and as I said, the cogs are definitely turning and the cobwebs are definitely being dusted off. But before absolutely no problem at all, but before I let you go, I've got to ask you, and I've already briefed you on this question because sometimes I forget to tell people that it's coming, is what other marketing buzzwords out there right now are you guys loving or hating? What's grinding your gears and making you go, I wish people would stop using this? Or something that you're like, yes, this is an amazing term and I hope that people really pick it up and run with it?
Do you want to go first?
No.
I got one. I nearly said it. No, if we listen back, I checked. I do find it's overused, isn't it? I mean, I can't think. In the sort of the months before, kind of left my job and Kerry left her job to do this sort of thing. That's that D word, isn't it? It's that disruption word, right? Oh man, I'm sick of it, right? Because the reality is, it's like people are champions, like, be a disruptor, you're going to disrupt things, whatever, you're going to change it, disrupt this and that. But the reality is, nobody really wants to be disrupted at all. It's like, to me, it's a very negative connotation, but it just gets banded around all the time. It becomes like it's almost like that's the magic solution to anything. Whereas actually, the notion of disrupting things is for most businesses, well, it's impossible, isn't it? You can only really be a disruptor if you're a new business. Technically, I think, Kerry, we could be disruptive because we're new and we've got a blank sheet of paper. But if you're in some business that's got, thousands of staff, elaborate processes, you hear about digital transformations and that sort of thing. What is that? I suppose digital is the other word, Ben, for me, because you don't really need to use it, do you? Because the world is as is. It just is, isn't it? You don't have to define the world as analog and digital now. It's just the world.
Well, that's the thing. It's when people talk about being digital marketing specialists. Well, you're just a marketing specialist these days, aren't you?
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, every day, I'm sure like us, if you sort of like survey the world that you're in and you look on the social media and you're on LinkedIn or Twitter and you see digital conferences, it's still a thing. I just can't really believe in 2018 that a digital conference or a digital seminar is or a digital expert, because you're just an expert, really, aren't you?
Yeah, well, you could argue if they are specialising purely in digital and ignoring the potential traditional stuff, so they don't do things like offline events, they don't do direct marketing. You could argue, I suppose, that there are undigital things to marketing, but surely they're all connected in some form or another. Without digital, you can't really put offline. It's much hard to put on mass scale offline events these days and stuff. So yeah, everything's entwined these days, isn't it? Really.
I think the same will go with creative. I think AI as a term, this should be as a good start. I don't think AI is a useful term right now of something that's kind of like, well, it's actually in people's lives quite deep if they thought about it, but it's sort of seen as something that's entering the arena. It's almost like the curtains are parting and it's one AI. But in 2 or 3 years' time, again, or maybe 5 years' time, it won't be AI because it will be life, won't it? We'll have AI conferences, we'll have AI specialists, but you don't really want to be that because it'll be like digital. It will just be part of the fabric of life, for want of a better term. So it doesn't need to be people have a sort of propensity to label everything, don't they? And that's why millennial. That's another one, but hey.
Already covered that one. Already covered millennials, but that's exactly what I'm actually writing in the new book. In my book at the moment is actually about how buzzwords actually then don't stay buzzwords forever, and they'll transform. And where you become an expert in a buzzword now, you'll have to pivot later because things don't stay as they are forever. So at one time, social media marketing, digital marketing, email marketing, these were all buzzwords of their time, and people became specialists in them. And now how many people specialise in just social media marketing now? Well, you've got a few, but actually they should be understanding how it fits in with everything else. So that's for me, that's something that I can wholly get on board with, and it's something that I'm equally fascinated by.
There we go.
There we are. Thanks
for your time.
Oh, absolutely no problem at all. You guys have been absolutely amazing, and I can't wait to share this out with the world. So thank you so much for coming on today, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Ben.
No worries. Bye.
Bye.
Creative AI. I'm always a bit confused sometimes about where AI is going to go and how it's potentially going to develop in the future. But after this conversation, I can sort of see some of the more useful applications of it. I can see how it's going to work going forward. I can see how businesses of all sizes could potentially get involved and how it will benefit them going forward. I like the idea that AI isn't just being used as an end product, but it can actually be used as a means to make people more creative. And I think it's a way that medium-sized businesses and potentially small businesses of the future can really use AI to their advantage and actually use AI to stand out from the crowd and not just be using AI for AI's sake. I think it's a fascinating world that we live in. I'm excited to see where it goes. So, if you are interested, please check out those guys at tinygiant.io. And that's more enough from me. I'll be back on Thursday with another bite-sized episode for you. Goodbye.
This podcast is part of the You Are the Media Network.